Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a mission, really, into the science behind managing some of the ocean's fastest living creatures.
That's right. We're focusing on a specific review paper today. It's titled Stock Assessment and Management of Cephalopods, Advances and Challenges for Short-Lived Fishery Resources, and it's led by Alexander Arkhipkin and colleagues, published back in 2021.
And it's a really critical piece because, we're talking about squid, octopus, cuttlefish, cephalopods. These aren't just ecologically fascinating.
Not at all. They're a huge global food source. Landings peaked at nearly 5 million tons in 2014, and they're incredibly important in the marine food web. They eat a lot, and a lot of things eat them.
Okay, but here's the central problem our Kipkin's paper tackles head-on. Cephalopods are, well, they live life in the fast lane. They're short-lived fishery resources.
Exactly, and that speed, their unique biology, it means the traditional ways we assess fish stocks, the methods developed over decades for things like cod or halibut.
Things that live for many years.
Right. Those methods just don't work. It's like trying to use a calendar to time a sprinter.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So what are these specific biological traits that cause so much trouble for the standard assessment toolkit?
Well, first off, the lifespan itself. We're often talking about just 1 year, maybe 6 months for some tropical squid, up to maybe 2 years for really large species. But typically, it's annual.
1 year. That's incredibly fast turnover.
It is. And then there's the reproduction. They're mostly similparous.
Meaning they spawn once, basically at the end of their life, and then die.
Pretty much, yeah. A terminal spawning event. Combine that with incredibly rapid growth, high natural mortality that isn't constant, and really complex population structures. You get multiple groups or micro-cohorts showing up throughout the year.
So all that biological speed and variability just completely clashes with the slower, more stable assumptions built into standard fish models.
Fundamentally, yes. The models expect multiple age classes coexisting, fish spawning repeatedly over years. Cephalopods just don't fit that mold.
Okay, let's dig into that speed problem a bit more. Why does that 1-year lifespan completely derail models that track fish populations year after year?
Well, it makes retrospective assessment almost useless. Because they turn over so quickly, any assessment has to happen in near real time within the fishing season itself. Often daily or weekly data is needed.
So a standard annual assessment is just looking back at ghosts, essentially. A population that's already lived, spawned, and died.
Precisely. You're doing an autopsy, not a health check. It tells you what happened, maybe, but it's too late to manage the current population effectively.
And I gather the basic science of figuring out their age is also a huge bottleneck compared to fish. It's not like counting rings on a tree.
Not at all. That's a major hurdle. Aging cephalopods means looking at these tiny structures called statoliths. They're like their ear bones.
Okay.
But instead of nice, clear annual rings like you get in many fish otoliths, you have to count daily growth increments. Hundreds of them. Microscopic lines for every single day of their short lives.
Wow. So you're not just glancing at it, you're meticulously counting potentially 300, 400, 500 tiny lines per animal.
Exactly. It's incredibly time-consuming, highly skilled work. You can't automate it easily. You can't mass-produce age data like you often can for fish stocks, where you might process thousands of otoliths relatively quickly.
So the data collection itself can't keep up with the speed of the animal's life cycle.
That's a huge part of the problem. The assessment tools need fast data, but getting fundamental data like age is inherently slow.
Okay, fast life, slow aging.
Mm-hmm.
What about mortality? You mentioned it's not constant. Standard models often assume a fixed natural mortality rate, M. That sounds like a bad assumption here.
It's a terrible assumption. For some oviparous animals that die after spawning, natural mortality obviously isn't constant. It ramps up massively towards the end of their life, especially post-spawning.
Right.
So if your model assumes M is just some low, steady number throughout their life, it dramatically underestimates the real mortality, especially the spawners. This leads managers to think the stock can handle more fishing pressure than it actually can.
Which is incredibly risky when you only get one shot at spawning.
Exactly. You could wipe out the spawning stock needed for next year's recruitment without realizing it until it's too late.
And then there's movement. You mentioned complex structures. Do they stay put? Because many models assume a closed population, right? That the stock you're assessing stays in one general area.
Yeah, and cephalopods just laugh at that assumption. That prolonged, sometimes year-round spawning creates multiple waves, these micro-cohorts, entering the fishing grounds at different times.
So the population isn't stable.
Not at all. And on top of that, many undertake huge migrations moving between feeding and spawning areas, sometimes offshore to inshore, deep to shallow. These can cover hundreds, even thousands of kilometers.
So if a fishing boat suddenly stops catching squid, it might not be because they've fished them out.
Exactly. It could be fishing depletion, sure, or the whole group could have just migrated somewhere else entirely. The models struggle to distinguish that without very specific data.
Okay, so the traditional toolbox is basically broken for these animals. Short lives, tricky aging, variable mortality, constant movement. Given all that, what does the Arkhipkin paper propose as the way forward? What's this fast lane assessment approach?
They strongly recommend moving towards what are called depletion models. These are clever because they don't necessarily need precise age data or assumptions about long-term stability.
How do they work then?
They use high-frequency, in-season data, think daily or weekly catch reports, and the corresponding fishing effort. By tracking how quickly the catch rate declines as effort is applied over a short period, the model can estimate the stock size that must have been there to start with.
So it's estimating abundance based on how quickly the fishing is depleting the stock within the season.
Precisely. It compresses the time step of the assessment to match the short time step of the animal's life and the fishery itself. That's the fast lane idea assessment moving as fast as the resource.
That makes sense. It sidesteps the problems of annual cycles and needing lots of age data.
It does. Traditional models like surplus production or age-structured models often rely on assumptions about equilibrium or multiple year classes that just don't hold for these species. Depletion models focus on the immediate observable dynamics.
Sounds ideal, scientifically speaking, but there must be a catch. You mentioned a data poverty paradox earlier.
And that's a massive caveat. Depletion models, especially the sophisticated ones, are incredibly data hungry. They need really good high-resolution data, collected very frequently daily catches, accurate effort tracking, good spatial information, lots of biological sampling in season.
So they work best where you have intensive monitoring and reporting infrastructure.
Exactly. And the reality, the paradox, is that while these data-rich models are the recommended solution, most cephalopod fisheries around the world are actually considered data poor or data limited. They simply don't have the infrastructure or resources to collect the required data.
So they're stuck using simpler, less appropriate models out of necessity.
Often, yes. Things like catch-only methods or basic production models, which we know are problematic but might be the only option available. That's a huge challenge.
Okay, but let's talk about where these advanced depletion models are being used. The paper gets really interesting here, describing how scientists have had to tweak and customize even these models to handle the sheer weirdness of squid populations in the real world.
Absolutely. It's not just plug and play. They've had to innovate constantly. A great example comes from the Falkland Islands fishery for the squid Doryteuthis gahi.
What happened there?
Well, the basic depletion model assumes a closed population that just declines due to fishing. But the data kept showing that new pulses of squid, these successive micro-cohorts, were arriving on the fishing grounds after the season had already started.
So the stock wasn't just declining, it was getting topped up unexpectedly.
Exactly. The simple model couldn't handle that influx. So researchers had to modify it, building in a term, essentially, for new recruits joining the assessed stock mid-season.
They basically built a door into the model to let new squid in mathematically.
Right.
That's clever. But what about problems with the catch data itself? Like if the squid's behavior makes the catch rate misleading?
Yes. That's where the generalized depletion model comes in. It deals with phenomena like hyperstability and hyperdepletion.
Hyperstability. That sounds counterintuitive. Catch rates stay high even when the stock is falling.
Precisely. It's a major trap. Squid, like many species, often aggregate in dense patches. Fishermen are skilled at finding these patches. So even as the overall stock is declining significantly, the catch rates for boats finding those patches can stay high for a long time.
Giving a false sense of security.
A very dangerous one. The generalized model includes parameters, often called A and B, to account for this nonlinear relationship between catch rate and actual abundance. Parameter B, specifically, helps model whether the catch rate declines faster or slower than the stock size, mathematically correcting for things like that patchy distribution causing hyperstability.
Okay, so the models are adapting to recruitment dynamics and catchability issues. But the paper also gives these amazing examples where the model had to adapt in real time to totally external events affecting the fishery.
Yeah, these really highlight how dynamic the management has to be. The first involved an unusual invasion, almost, of a different squid species, Ilex argentinus, onto the Dora-Toothis fishing grounds.
A competitor or predator showing up?
Both, really, and the fishing vessels started targeting Ilex some of the time because it was there and valuable. This messed up the effort data for the target Dora-Toothis.
Right, because effort spent catching Ilex wasn't depleting Dora-Toothis.
Exactly. So the scientists had to adapt the depletion model on the fly. They implemented a system using two different catchability coefficients, essentially, two measures of fishing efficiency based on the proportion of Ilex being caught each day. The model dynamically adjusted based on what the fleet was actually targeting.
That's incredible real-time adaptation. And the second example involved seals.
Yes. An unexpected influx of South American fur seals started interacting with the fishing gear, leading to bycatch concerns. Management required the vessels to start using seal exclusion devices, or SEDs, in their nets.
Which could change how effectively the nets catch squid.
Potentially, yes. So again, the assessment model had to be modified immediately. They introduced another layer of complexity. Two catchability coefficients, one for trawls using SEDs and one for trawls without SEDs, to ensure the abundance estimates remained accurate despite the change in fishing gear technology.
It's like the model itself is alive, constantly being updated based on real-world events. This points to a totally different management philosophy, doesn't it? Compared to setting an annual quota for cod and just monitoring landings.
Completely different. The absolute key is in-season management. Because the stocks are so volatile and live so short lives, management decisions, especially about fishing effort levels or closing the fishery early, have to be made during the fishing season based on the real-time outputs from these depletion models.
You can't wait until next year to react to a potential problem.
No way. If recruitment is poor in a given year, managers need to be able to see that depletion happening faster than expected and cut back effort, or even close the fishery to make sure enough spawners escape to produce the next generation.
And this links back to the reference points used.
Yeah.
You mentioned maximum sustainable yield. MSY isn't always the best fit.
Right. MSY is often calculated based on assumptions about maximizing long-term yield from a multi-year stock. For these short-lived Cephalopods species, the primary concern is preventing recruitment overfishing, ensuring enough individuals survive to spawn.
So what's recommended instead?
The paper strongly advocates for reference points based on percent maximum spawning potential, MSP. The goal is to define a minimum threshold for the spawning stock biomass, SSB, that needs to escape the fishery each year, SSB-min, to ensure sufficient recruitment the following year. It's all about protecting that single spawning event.
Makes sense. And in terms of practical management tools, is it better to control how much boats can catch, Sitching peaks, or how much they can fish, TAE?
The Falklands example, which is a success story in many ways, uses total allowable effort, TAE. This tends to work better for these dynamic fisheries.
Why is that?
Controlling effort, which can be adjusted in season based on the depletion model results, allows for more direct control over the fishing pressure. Total allowable catch, take, can sometimes lead to a race to fish early in the season, making it harder to manage depletion rates carefully, especially if abundance turns out lower than initially predicted. TAE offers more flexibility for real-time adjustments.
Okay, so sophisticated single-species management is possible with the right data and models. But the paper looks even further ahead towards integrated ecosystem assessment, IEA. Why is that the ultimate goal?
Because cephalopods don't live in a vacuum. As we said, they're major predators of some things and crucial prey for others: fish, marine mammals, seabirds. Managing them purely as a single stock ignores their massive role in the ecosystem.
So IEA would try to account for those connections.
Ideally, yes. It would consider predator-prey dynamics, environmental influences, and the impacts of fishing on the entire food web. However, the paper is also realistic. IEAs are incredibly complex, demand even more data than the advanced depletion models, and come with much higher levels of uncertainty. It's the direction we need to move in, but it's a huge analytical and data-gathering challenge.
So wrapping this up, the core message seems to be managing cephalopods sustainably demands a radical shift. We have to embrace their speed, use models designed for that speed, collect data in real time, and manage adaptively within the season itself.
Yeah.
It's a complete departure from the old finfish paradigm.
That's the essence of it, and the biggest hurdle right now is scaling up. These advanced methods work where you have the data, like the Falklands, but extending this approach or finding robust alternatives for the vast majority of cephalopod fisheries globally, which are data poor, remains a critical unresolved challenge. Future work really needs to focus there, and also on better ways to quantify the uncertainty in these fast assessments.
Which brings us to a final, perhaps slightly unsettling thought for you, our listeners. We've talked about the need for assessment and management to operate on daily or weekly timescales to match the biology. But think about the institutions, the regional fisheries management organizations, the national agencies. They often work on annual cycles for stock assessment reviews, scientific advice, and political decision-making.
Mm-hmm. There's often a significant lag.
The paper points out this lag can mean up to a 2-year delay between scientists detecting a serious stock decline and management measures actually being implemented. Now, consider a squid that lives maybe 1 to 1.5 years total. How can a management system with a potential 2-year reaction time possibly protect a resource that lives and dies within that window? That fundamental mismatch in speed, biological versus bureaucratic, might be the single biggest and perhaps most difficult challenge in safeguarding these vital ocean resources. Something to ponder.